Koriyama town. The cream box smiles, no frowns around. Soft and sweet, with a glowing hue. It's the perfect snack for me and you.
Hello everybody, welcome back.
Radioactive cream box, oh what a treat. The core still melting, but
Woo!
the spread is sweet.
There we go.
Fukushima's gift, just take a bite. Nothing's wrong here, it's all alright. Alright.
How's everybody feeling on this Wednesday, the 23rd day of April? I used to complain a long time ago there wasn't enough anti-nuclear music. And that day is long gone, man. We got the stuff. That's a song by James Lucid, a filmmaker, musician on YouTube. Make sure you check him out. He just cracked 300 anti-nuclear songs, which is more than the entire planet. He's the first person in history to write AI, anti-nuclear music, and then married up with AI videos. And the results are just, as you've seen, stunning. Very fortunate. We're very fortunate. You'll find links in the bottom of my description to his site. If you're watching this later, you can call into these live shows at 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. I can't make Texas to Britain, apparently. But if you're in New Mexico, if you're in the United States, if you're in Canada, we're good to go. We got a rather important poll tonight. Is it acceptable for the pro-nuclear journalists, academics, and the nuclear industry to relentlessly lie, to viciously, relentlessly lie in every sentence, every paragraph, multiple lies? And we're after doing thousands of these shows to explain the lie and show you the documentation of what was the actual facts. And so there's no doubt about it, this industry, I don't, does anybody know if there's another industry out there that has that particular attribute where it's a relentless stream every day of propaganda about an industry? Like nuclear, if just 10% of the truth was out there, nuclear could never exist. That's the madness of the story on top of that. But they've been shielded their entire existence for 80 years. And now they've compromised the future of humanity. I'm going to give you a couple examples of how nonchalant they are about telling lies on top of that, which is really hard to reconcile because they see it as normal. It's Martin Frackler. He was with the New York Times, I believe, at this point. This was just after Fukushima and multiple nuclear meltdowns. And he had a stunning, it was like no big deal. He was at this nuclear forum.
My name is Martin Fackler. I am the Tokyo Bureau Chief. And the title, as we just heard, was Challenges and Opportunities After the Fukushima Nuclear Disaster, this crisis management. And the question of what do you tell your public? You know, I mean, do you tell them that there's a serious nuclear accident, or do you play it down? Do you try to cover it up?
So that's called social engineering. What are you talking about? It was just like, do we do this? Do we just, the public, public scumbags. That's what they're saying. So frustrating after all these years to see these people, they prosper on top of that beyond your wildest dreams. Well, New Brunswick chose a small modular nuclear reactor. Now, like, the joke of it is, at least on our side of the table, is it's a massive small modular reactors they're talking about. These are not small. This is the Canadian, and we covered a story about one of the American states we're going to... It's 35 meters upwards and extends 38 meters below ground. A total of 73 meter. Fukushima was 65 meters. It was a 190-foot, 19-story building. These are 24-story buildings that are going to be burning the most insidious fuel. 80 years they haven't been able to come up with a solution for the fuel. They just don't care. And the reason we need a solution to use fuel is because it's still splitting atoms and there's no containment. It means you're contaminating every species, every human, all the time, from many different directions. And the contamination we're talking about it's unbelievable amounts. It's enough to compromise every single species permanently, eventually eradicate them. Just from the fuel pools. And there's no urgency. It's quite the opposite. What do we do? Do we cover it up? Do we play it down? What do we tell the public? The scumbags. The pain in our arses. One possible alternative is the reactor design Ontario Power Generation. This is Canadian. Hopes to build at the Darlington site. It's a massive... It's bigger than a 1 gigawatt reactor. There's 100 companies out there that just started up in the last 5-6 years or so. And they all got their own design, allegedly. None of them have produced a design to the regulatory agencies. And all that time with 100 companies. And then the one that claims it's a small modular reactor is bigger than the reactors at Fukushima that melted down. Bigger than the Chernobyl reactor. Bigger than the Sellafield reactors. Bigger than 3 Mile Island. And you let these people get out there and call it a small modular reactor. Oh, there's a small modular reactor, Dana. They got the same gigawatts as they did in 1996. They can't get rid of the fuel, so they're just going to burn it. And the releases from that and the emissions from it, once you take it out of the reactor cores, are catastrophic. Nothing but hot particles, everything. You're talking about invisible snowstorms. And they want to put, thousands of these things out there on top of that? They're saying we need to make sure we eradicate every species on the planet. That's what they're up to, clearly. But the lies, the perpetual lies. Premier continues to prop up the nuclear industry to please the lobbyists. This is Canada. The Canadian nuclear industry, which is put on a pedestal as a model for many countries, is subsidized at $7.3 billion each year that we know about. I'm sure it's a lot more than that. This is a doctor who does transplants. He does the transplants by irradiating the victim. Kill every cell in their body. And just cross your fingers and hope it works, because it's never worked before in 80 years. But let's hope it works this time. So he was down talking to the Fukushima employees, and he wanted to convince the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. That's who's working there. And that's who he was talking to. His name is Robert Gale, Dr. Robert Gale. He got degrees in everything. He's one of the smartest people in human history. But he's sadistic in every sense of the word. So a nuclear meltdown, where the nuclear scientists won't go there, but he's convincing the victims of society that are going to go in there for $11.50 a day, US, that is equal to smoking 14 cigarettes or eating peanut butter or 20 days in New York Nuclear meltdowns are equal to 20 days. Driving 600. There's no repercussion for telling these lies. He's a doctor who, by the way, murders every one of his patients with radiation. No success stories in his entire legacy. From King's. Flying 40,000 kilometers in a plane is worse. All of this is worse. 15 minutes in a kayak. Now, he's not talking about 14 cigarettes a day. He's talking about 14 cigarettes total. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year after Fukushima, and they never gave it the statistics after that. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed, right? There's not just cancer. This is the first year, 865,000 cancers. But the experts that are going to tell your children and set the policies in your community, in your hospitals, in your nuclear dump area, whatever, are going to be the people that are going to set those policies are the same people that are cutting everybody's throats. Kayaking for 15 minutes or smoking 14 cigarettes in your entire life is you get a bigger dose of radiation you would at a multiple nuclear meltdowns. How can anybody rationalize that that's not a freaking problem, right? How does that work? I showed you a bunch of really interesting stuff last night's show for the first hour. I got censored heavy, 130-something views, really, on a show I've been doing for over a decade. It works on some people. Some people say, well, it's got no views. I'm not watching that. And if they did watch it, they would go somewhere else because it's not their thing. They're not interested in knowledge. Here's another. We got a lot of stories to get through tonight, so I'm not going to do very much of this, but the Canadians' so-called nuclear waste management organization, which had $26 billion for 22 years, didn't build anything. Didn't grow a cent of interest, by the way, that they declared anyway. Spent 14 years negotiating with a community where they wasn't even sure that it was possible to use it as a so-called deep geological repository. Had checked all the bases, dotted all the I's and T's and crossed the T's. Confidence, and so this is one example of it. These two scientists, and we should all be ashamed, their parents should be just humiliated that they actually managed to get a degree. But the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is the industry in Canada. So that copper coating is what they're going to put on the cast, where they're going to store the nuclear waste for millions of years. And they say that cast won't breach because it has a 1/10 of an inch, 1/10 of a centimeter, is it 1 millimeter? It's finally confirmed that the copper coating on the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's design container for used nuclear fuel, which is compromised, and it will compromise 6 feet of titanium and 6 feet of lead and 6 feet of the best steel you can get, will not breach a millimeter of copper. It's robust and thick enough to withstand any corrosive effect for over 1 million years. And copper is one of the most corrosive things out there. That's why we use it for electricity. It's such a conductor. When you get different metals. And so the problem with nuclear waste, anybody that's in the industry would know, is the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha shine, the gamma shines, neutrons, X-rays, betas, and everything else, will just destroy the integrity of just in the first couple of years. But there's no descending voice. You can see how many people's on my show. There is a big audience out there for this topic, by the way, currently, which is the industry itself. Because the industry is compartmentalized. They don't question stuff. Some of them do, I'm sure, but it's a lot easier to sleep at night in an evil industry when you don't question things. Let's put it that way. So these are the geniuses who says 1 millimeter of copper is better than 6 feet of lead, is better than 6 feet of steel, is better 6 feet of titanium. Because it's dirt cheap, right? Copper's dirt cheap for that application. It doesn't work, can't work, it doesn't have any of the attributes. It's pathetic that that's the story they decide to go with. Well, when you got interest rolling in every year from $26 billion, and it'd be at least 40 years, they say, before they can build a repository, because digging a hole in the ground, anybody can do it except for Canadians. Because they have no intentions. If they spend the money, which is going to cost $26 billion to dig the deep geological repository, they don't have the interest each year on $26 billion. But they have never declared a nickel interest. Do you find that impossible? Or am I just being unreasonable? By the way, nuclear power is hoping to drive the climate crisis. Nuclear power, apart from destroying the biodiversity throughout its life cycle, the insects and birds and mammals and animals and humans, produces up to 37 times the CO2 emissions of renewable energy sources. It's 37 times more dirty than renewable. And did you know geothermal actually exists? Small modular reactors don't. Fusion doesn't. Imagine if you took all these mines and that monetary and that equipment and those precious resources and put it into geothermal. Where would we be right now? If we spent 50 years developing geothermal. They spent 50 years hiding geothermal. It's impossible to completely hide it, but they seem to do a really good job. And if a geothermal plant breaks down in the first year, you're not going to see headlines like this. 85,000 extra cancers. It's 14,200 children out of every 100,000 across the entire country needs open heart surgery. Neonates and infants for congenital heart disease because of radioactive fallout. You have transplant surgeons who killed every one of their patients with radiation. Has never successfully So what the hell is going on? They're not trying to come up with a solution. They find the most devious and turn them into monsters. Even worse devious. Stretch of a New Jersey wildfire forces evacuation reaches a closed nuclear power plant. And they say, well, it's got nuclear fuel there during cast. Do you know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about the 50 years that it existed. The fuel pools had no containment, and those forests are incredibly radioactive because that fuel, before it finally went into a cast, for decades was splitting atoms, and that's where it was going to, all those forests that are burning. And the sequestering of a very long time of a very large amount of radioactive fallout, the fuel is still splitting the same atoms as it would to boil water for a million homes and businesses. And the reactor fuel pools are full of reactor cores. It's way more than the reactor itself. They're splitting atoms. So every time you put fuel in the fuel pools, you're increasing the 24-hour fuel cycle of radioactive atoms being released. That's why almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And that's why there's only 16 people on my show, and I only have 10 likes. 9 thumbs up on my very important poll. It's a tricky poll. It's not your typical poll. You have to vote no. It kind of goes against your will because you've been voting yes for so many years. The fire has grown rapidly to encompass 3,450 hectares. That's a lot of radioactive fallout, folks. So what they decided to do was to play a game with you and say, well, no, the casts are designed to survive an event like this. Well, one thing about these casts is they still need air conditioning. If they lose power, they could heat up. The Joneses Road forest fire, the plant is still dependent on external power, right? Advancing, and there is tens of thousands of people without power. Advancing near the plant still houses spent fuel, has led to evacuations and triggered round-the-clock oversight. And again, you can't believe a single word this industry is going to tell you. Like, you just can't do it. The idea of the story is to lie to you. Every story, the story is based around how many lies can you squeeze in. It's like a big joke. And whoever's writing it has to be very skilled to do this. And you can imagine what kind of sadistic, twisted creature would write these types of stories and lie so much about when it comes to nuclear. This is a little bit different as a force fire. Officials have said, but again, they rejected the fact that the area is saturated with radioactive fallout, and they talk about cast. And so it's basically a promotion for the cast is what they've done in these stories. Officials have said that even if a fire did reach the spent fuel, there would be no danger. Right? Again, they can't quantify that assertion. Because it needs external power to keep it cool. What you should worry about is the fact that the forests are incredibly radioactive. Because the fuel pools, before they put it all in a cast, it was 50 years of radioactive fallout all day, every day. And each year there was a bit more radioactive fallout because they were adding fuel to the pools. This industry should never, ever, ever got past Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The radioactive, and they covered that up successfully, right? The victims of Nagasaki, Hiroshima, were denied any kind of health coverage for internal radiation for 74 years. There's very few survivors. A couple of years ago when Prime Minister Suga, he finally relented. I think it was like 75 people left. And he gave them health care as if they were poisoned from the inside. There is, and if you look at my presentations on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I show you the studies acknowledging the radiation, and I can tell you the horror stories of the radiation where people's organs melted, not from the heat, but from the radiation. Even if fire did reach the spent, so they turned it into a promotion for the fuel cast, which is typical of the nuclear industry. Almost all the nuclear stories are written by the International Atomic Energy Agency and nuclear lobbying groups, the World Nuclear News, for instance. Iran reinforces security at a nuclear tunnel complex amid the United States and Israel threats. I don't think Israel is going to attack Iran because Iran's going to flatten their nuclear facilities before Israeli lands back into whatever puny country they just came from. Those countries might not have an airport left for them to land in. They're target number one. All the bases supporting British, French, American in the Middle East are very tiny countries. And after all these years, if they're going to destroy Iran says they're taking them out first. They're going to be gone in 6 hours to 24 hours. All those little countries will be destroyed. They're going to take out Israel's nuke sites. They're going to take out all their airports, military installations. And there's nothing Israel can do about it. And after 24 hours, Israel will have no infrastructure left. And if Israel is going to be wiped out, they're taking out the zombies. That's the best way to describe them. Huh? Tehran resisted demand to dismantle the program. Why would Iran, and I'm anti-nuclear as you can get, by the way, but why would Iran give up its nuclear? Because then it's going to look like Ukraine, right? They know Iran's got nuclear, otherwise it'd be flattened right now. And so this is meant to bully Iran. It simply can't work that way. This is not 2015 anymore. Things have changed, dude. And so the media had to paint that up as if Donald President, who withdrew the U.S. from the 2015 nuclear agreement during his first tenure, which aimed to prevent Tehran from developing nuclear weapons, to threaten to bomb Iran unless the rapid agreement is reached to ensure the same goal. It's simply not going. You can do all the threats you want. You can go bomb Iran all you want. They're going to take out all the American military bases, French and United Kingdoms. They're going to take out those little tiny countries that have been supporting the genocide in the Middle East, and they're going to take out everything in Israel. Israel's not a very big country. Israel's never fought a real war. It doesn't know how to fight a real war. They got the jet fighters up to flying around, and there's no one shooting at them. They just take their time killing all the Palestinian children and women, day in, day out. Yeah, the world sits in silence. They're living high and mighty. They got all the tanks, no one's shooting back at them. But Iran can shoot back at them, sustained for many years at an absurd pace. With sophisticated drones, sophisticated missiles, they're not going to do it. Israel's pretty stupid, but they're not that stupid. They're just trying to bully him, right? Even China acknowledges it. China backs Iran's nuclear talks with the United States and opposes illegal sanctions. Well, Iran's had sanctions against them for decades. Land, sea, and air embargoes and sanctions. There's 48 military bases, United States, Britain, United Kingdom, French rather, military bases on their borders for decades that have nuclear weapons and chemical and biological weapons and everything else. They can destroy Iran, absolutely, but can they do it quicker than Iran can destroy all their bases in the Middle East? They'll cut off oil to the entire planet. You'll be paying $20 a gallon for your oil in no time, within a week. Industry will flop. Transportation will flop. Transport trucks won't be able to deliver. After 6 days of no toilet paper, this planet will lose its mind. China supports Iran holding talks on its nuclear program with the states, the bullies, the military-industrial complex we're talking about. The United States doesn't want to go to war with Iran. It's the Israeli military-industrial and the military-industrial complex that does. And opposes you. I mean, Israel was the fourth biggest producer of weapons in 2014, right? I don't know what they're like lately, but all they do is make misery, don't they? And they use the force of illegal unilateral sanctions to try and resolve the issue. The Chinese foreign minister. But the military-industrial complex is a zombie machine. It's a zombie machine. It has to consume everything on the planet to keep going, and that's what it's doing now. Especially with the radioactive fallout. My goodness, we've compromised now the existence of humanity and the species. We're in real trouble. And it's because radioactive fallout takes a few decades to play out, and we're 14 years down the road with this pulse event. 36 reactor cores melted down at the 4 reactor buildings because the fuel pools were full of reactor cores. And you can pretend this is not happening, but you're making a mistake. You can say, well, I'm very wealthy. I got this on my side. I got that on my side. It doesn't matter. You're not immune to radioactive fallout. You're already contaminated. You're already poisoned. And there's just, in your loved ones, it's up. Everything is. Every species. They've really done it to us. They've been doing it for 80 years, right? But the 2014 event, I mean, they built the reactors on the tectonic plates, 40 miles from the tectonic plates. It's the equivalent of being on the tectonic plates. With a 3,000-year legacy of 300-foot tsunamis and massive earthquakes. Because, you're on the tectonic plates. And they spread reactors all along the tectonic plates. And Fukushima's section of the tectonic plates was the first to go. The other ones will go at some point. Just like the Noto Ishikawa Prefecture in 24 on January 1st, the 3,500-year-old fault line, significant rupture. With a tsunami that rose up 75 miles of the coastline, rose at 13, 14 feet out of the ground for like a half mile offshore. It dried up 6 harbors. Like, why would you? And then the prevailing winds cover northern hemisphere in about 10 days and the rest of the planet in 20 to 30 days. And then the cycle never stops. Everything out there now is radioactive pollen on the planet, for goodness sakes. You're making a big mistake by not fighting this industry. You're making a fatal mistake. You have to fight back against this industry. You can't sit and let this industry continue. This industry has no checks and balances. That's your job. You need to find a way to fight back. You need to get busy. You need to wake up this planet, have a conversation. It's no good talking to Israel. That's like talking to Israel right there. They're completely unreasonable. They live in a fantasy all day, every day. The whole society was raised to hate the Palestinians and Muslims, right? Right from childhood, they're from kindergarten, they're raised to be disenfranchised from every species, every human and every species on the planet. Right? The society can only end up as it is right now. That's the only way it could ultimately end up. Such a short period of time, they managed, the whole society is just lunatic. U.S. President Donald Trump is sought to pursue a maximum pressure campaign on Tehran, including driving Iranian oil exports to zero. It won't be long now before Iran drives out the U.S. imports to zero. Where Trump thinks that he can oil in his own country. He can, but it's going to take you a long time to get up to speed. And if you don't get it up to speed, industry will fall apart. Well, except for the military. They are the biggest polluters worldwide. All the militaries combined are worse than the biggest continent we got. Nuclear watchdog urges trust but verify that engages in good faith negotiations. Nuclear watchdog, which is the International Degenerate Agency. You know the guy, the Rafael Grossi goes around sniffing bicycle seats, that guy, right? He's the guy, with many, many others, who goes down and picks up recently went down and picked up a $14.6 million check from Japan. Japan's the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's right, for this anniversary, just before this anniversary. He flew on a private jet, flew out with $14.6 million, and said there was no explosions. There was no nuclear meltdown. There is no radioactive fallout. There's nothing in the water going into the ocean. And we'll see you on the next schedule. Last year, when they wanted to reuse the bags, he flew into Japan, picked up $19 million check from Japan, then flew off to South Korea the next day. But he done a press conference. And all the cameras were click, 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 click. They all came out with the story. Rafael Grossi says the water's safe. Every one of them. The same paragraph, the same picture, the same author. But yet there was all these different medias there with their cameras, and they had the same picture and the same paragraph and the same author. They couldn't exist 10 minutes without lying. Telling the truth, they would never work in the nuclear industry again. Their car might run into a tree and they might die if they told the truth. I don't know if any of them is capable of telling the truth. Have you ever seen anybody that retired from the nuclear industry and blew the lid off it? No. Years and years ago, people used to call me the whistleblower. They were so confused that somebody was out telling the truth. They figured I must have been a whistleblower. I never heard this stuff before. That's crazy. They'll lose their minds. Doing a bit better today. Yesterday I slept 5 times. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. And today I only slept once. So that's really good. Some relief. Been sleeping for about 5 days. Still do a show at night though. Still managed to get it together for a show. Don't try to make sense of it, but you better make sense of it. If Iran gets a nuclear bomb, it dramatically changes the Middle East. because they can't bully and threaten and coerce and sanction and everything else anymore. If Iran don't get a nuclear bomb, if they don't have a nuclear bomb, they're going to look like Ukraine. The reason Ukraine looks like it does is because they gave up their nuclear weapons. Same as North Korea. Why would North Korea give up its nuclear weapons? They were a slave to Japan for 50 years. They were captured and just abused horrifically. Then Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened. Then United Nations, League of Nations changed their name to United Nations. 195 militaries and went in there, called it a police action with 195 militaries. And there's millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. Because they want the precious resources, the lithium, the nickel, the gold, the uranium in that country, right? And they've been ostracized for another 75 years this year, is it? I think. So 125 years ostracized from the world. 125 years. And they had no choice but to build nuclear weapons. I can't stand nuclear weapons because look at what the radioactive fallout has done to us. If we never had all the nuclear testing, which was an actual nuclear war, same bombs, same radioactive fallout, prove me wrong. The Soviet Union had the biggest war. They let off a single bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. 3,800. There's no checks and balances. This industry controls your university, controls all your media, and everything else by proxy. And then Rafael Grossi, he's just UN. That's UN. It's not International Atomic Energy Agency. There's many subsidies. There's UNSCREAR, there's IRPA, there's the IPRC, there's IAEA, there's another couple. And they're all UN. They're sort of, don't blame the IAEA per se, the IAEA, blame the United Nations, which is 195 militaries. I think it's 192 now, is it? Maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't matter if it's 192 militaries or 195 militaries. I don't think so. That person should be charged with every crime against humanity you can think of. Genocides, omnicide, his entire legacy. Atoms for Humanity. There's United Nations. Atoms for Humanity. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs. It doesn't shoot nothing but DOLRAM, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive material. It's only low compared to a fuel rod, which, the comparison shouldn't be there. It's level. It's dangerous radioactive material, not low level. It should never be called. There is no such thing as low level. A single atom, you put 200 million on the head of a needle, you can't see it, but a single one will give you eventually a cancer, a tumor. And so what they do is they go into these countries and they blast. They shoot 1.5 tons a minute. And in Kuwait, they had shot, outside of Kuwait, it was around 700 tons or something. And a physicist from Japan at a Hamburg conference equated with 44,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of radioactive fallout. And so then, when they pull out of an area, the families will go back to their homes, and the children will take up their coloring books and their toys, and it'll be totally coated in depleted uranium, dirty bomb fallout. McAllister, Oklahoma, they have like 1,000 facilities, buildings there, but they have 3 big factories, main factories. The 1,800 people in the community, anybody that doesn't work at the local businesses works for the weapons producer, right? McAllister with an A. And they only make depleted uranium munitions. They make them for rifles. They make them for the 155 millimeter tanks. For the A-10 Warthog, that's all. It shoots 1.5 tons a minute. And this whole contraption was supposed to be for hardened targets only. They go and shoot all the farms, all the drinking water, the wells, the schools, the banks, the malls, and everything else. And so people need these infrastructures right away. And so everything is radioactive. But Dana, he's dressed up in a suit, in a real pretty looking suit, and he got a smart looking harness he wears on his body. He specially gets to fly a plane for the genocide machine. They're the serial killers. That's a serial killer. Atoms for humanity, huh? I remember when I seen just something about that story there. Like a couple of years ago, I covered a story where the United States wanted to get rid of 36 million of these bullets, depleted uranium bullets, because they had better, bigger, faster, smarter, prettier bullets. And so they put out a tender for some company to dispose of 36 million depleted uranium rounds, radioactive rounds, dirty bombs. The best way to describe them is a dirty bomb. If I took one of them and tied explosives around it and blew it up in your community, it's a dirty bomb. And they're pyrophoric. They catch fire as they're going through the air, which means you're releasing huge radiation in the entire trajectory. And then the wind is like a radioactive fallout plume because they shoot so much. So the whole industry is insane. Raphael Grossi says it's like a banana and a potato chip walking in the sunshine and in his canoe and everything else. Here's the doozy of doozy stories. Second melted fuel sample retrieved from the crippled. Gets no prominence. The nuclear meltdowns get no prominence in any medias. This was the original footage of reactor 3 and 4. Each reactor had 8 reactor cores at the top of the buildings and the 2 fuel pools. You don't have to be a genius to know that these are small modular reactors compared to the one they're going to build, by the way. These are only 190 feet tall, 150 feet by 150 feet by 190 foot, 65 meters, 19-story tall buildings. Compared to the new reactors at 24 stories, 240 feet. But they're small modular reactors, not this one. There is no small modular reactor. It's a perpetual scam with this industry. And what was I looking at in this picture? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. So I drew that red rectangle box there. Because we know that this inner harbor, this man-made harbor, and we'll call it an inner harbor, they cemented the whole bloody thing because fuel assemblies from the detonation of reactor 3, it ejected the reactor cores right out of the buildings. We haven't got no video of reactor 4. We got videos of reactor 1 blowing up, reactor 3 blowing up. Both of these are right alongside of reactor 4. But for some reason, we don't have a video of reactor 4 blowing up. So 190-foot building. So let me play with this for a minute. So that's the stump in 2013, early 2013. Does that look like a 190-foot tall building to anybody? Am I missing something? Am I being too hard on the nuke-tard industry? Because it's important because the reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the very top of the building, not the bottom of the building. So they're pretending they're at the top of the reactor 4. In fact, in 2015, this picture was taken in 2015, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bear with me. My apologies. I'm not digressing. I'm just extrapolating more on So there's reactor 3 in early 2013, reactor 4. They're not 190-foot buildings. At the top of each of the reactors were 8 reactor cores. They're gone. That happened to be a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. So it in particular, Medusa, ejected the fuel assemblies, and you can see, if you had showed a video, you'll see the reactor core and the fuel pools falling back down. Some of that landed out here. So they cemented all of that. Just thought it was important. I tell you all of that. All 14 of you. The operator of the Fukushima Daiichi power complex says it retrieved a second sample of melted fuel Wednesday. Because the way I see life is, if you never quit, you never fail. So if you never quit, you'll be okay when you're doing the stuff we're doing here, right? There's a handful of us. There's a little tiny group here that is keeping this story alive. And the poll tonight is such an interesting poll. If you're not familiar with the subject, why would you have a poll like this? Is it acceptable for the pro-nuke journalists and academics in the nuclear industry to viciously and relentlessly lie? Is it acceptable? Well, 13 of you says no. That's the right answer. And so how do we hold them accountable? Do we get a big wood chipper? Do we convert it? The debris extracted from the number 2 reactor and, change the law so that they can be held accountable? Tokyo Electric Power Company Holding Incorporation believed to weigh 3 grams or less. So they got the first chunk they got out in last year in November was, we'd covered it extensively for the whole week, was the size of a grain of rice. They got a bit of blowback from that. So this year they claimed they changed the narrative a little bit this year. They said it was the size of a raisin. The size of a boogard. At this contraption. And so now this time they got 3 grams, which is the size of 2 raisins. Out of an estimated 880 tons remaining in the number 1 of 3 units. Each reactor had 3,450 assemblies. Each assembly is 1,800 pounds. So you can multiply it by 4 to get the real number. So they've been chipping away at it. Same as they're claiming they're on top of a building that doesn't exist, chipping away at it. The entire nuclear core ejected into the environment. It doesn't matter if it was a hydrogen, it doesn't matter if it was a steam excursion, it doesn't matter. It happened. And pretending it didn't happen is where we're at right now. And you got, when I put this picture together in 2013, I was pretty sure that would wake the world up, and boy was I wrong. My goodness, was I ever wrong. But the buildings don't exist. But the importance of it is each reactor core was equal to 100 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was a small reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It didn't have any fuel pools. And it was graphite, which is it's terrible, don't get me wrong. It closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom because of Chernobyl, 3,000 kilometers away. But at the top of each of Fukushima buildings were 8 reactor cores, and reactor 4 was 9. And each reactor core is equal to at least 100 Chernobyls. They're very big reactors, pure uranium, pure plutonium. And so you're talking about 3,600 Chernobyls. Chernobyl, they didn't go to hell with the cover story originally. They did after, and you can go see my presentations on it. But they studied every species in Europe. There's an endless sex ratio studies in the entire population, because the only reason you do those types of studies is if because it costs a lot of money, you're going to prove statistically that And the sex ratio studies more males than females, which means less population. And if it's going to be true for humans, it's going to be true for all the other species. And so if you don't care about the humans, good for you. But care about the 8 million species who didn't do nothing to you, and you wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for them. And you won't continue to exist if we don't have them. The retrieved sample is scheduled to be sent from Fukushima Prefecture to a research institute in neighboring Ibaraki Prefecture after it's weighed and radiation levels are measured. Ooh. Last November, TEPCO retrieved the first melted sample weighing 0.7 grams from the number 2. So there's a whole bunch of these stories. I got to thinking to myself, well, the last one they said was close to a gram, 0.7 of a gram. This one is 3 grams, so they're going to have to change the rules. But when they sent the sample in November down to Tokyo, it was a big whoop. They wouldn't tell anybody it was moving. It was all secrecy. They had the military. They had... So the second Fukushima debris removal trial is complete. Will be transferred to Tokyo under military Air Force strict oversight. Backed by the Navy, tracked by Satellites Helicopters. It'll be escorted by gunships and fighter jets. It'll have snipers along the way and tanks at strategic places to come out and defend it if some terrorist tries to get it. All highways will be closed and shelter in place will be mandatory across North America, not just Japan. Because they got 3 grams this time. All schools will be closed worldwide. Strict curfews will be enforced with shoot-on-sight orders until the transfer of Fukushima bananas is secured. All nuclear workers and academics are exempt and will get a year's pay bonus and a free vacation every 3 weeks for life to celebrate the world's biggest scam and betrayal. All hail evil idiot nuclear. And I felt better when I wrote that today, and I took a nap. And I got up and I worked diligently, and here we are now. But this is, I'm trying to beat them to their playbook. Because the next story that's going to come out is in 3 or 4 days is successfully in Tokyo or Ibaraki or wherever they're going to send it this time. And, you know, they had a big operation. There was helicopters and drones and satellites tracking it. They had police and military and Navy SEALs, and they had, mark my words for it, that's what they had done last year in November. But see, the problem is, they took this device and they put it down in reactor 2, but they didn't need to put anything in reactor 2. A nuclear meltdown is a nuclear meltdown. They could have got a sample from Medusas. And at the rig that they used, the contraption that they used, they spent $40 million in 4 years building it. And this just extends out. And at the top of it, there's this incredibly sophisticated device. It's called a tongue. And it's going to go down there and blindly try to grab a piece. This case they said, is around 3 grams. So the question is, why didn't you put a vacuum cleaner on it and get all your samples at one time? Why didn't you put duct tape on it? Because duct tape, or Gorilla Tape even, because it's the biggest scam in history. This industry is brutal. It's a brutal, hateful industry. It hates you because it's never been held accountable. It has no incentive not to be evil. It has no incentive not to be a sadistic demon that it actually is. Boom, 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 boom. Dun, 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 dun. The site of one of the history's worst nuclear accidents. Cha-cha. It was 36 reactor cores. There is no accident in history, or all of them in history. If you take one of the reactors and none of the fuel pools at Fukushima, that's worse than all the meltdowns in history. Multiplied by 36. And then you got to put in the equation meltdowns. Because meltdowns, you got You got millions of pounds of fuel burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. This is going to consume everything around it. It's going to atomize and aerosol steel and rebar and cement and everything else. And it's going to ionize and radiate it. So it's like a nuclear weapon going off every single day with the releases in a 24-hour cycle. U.S. nuclear expert Lake Barrett is about to become the prime minister. He's going to be the tallest prime minister they've ever had in Japan. Does Japan deserve a tall prime minister? That way, his head... Never mind. And Lake Barrett covered up 3 Mile Island. You don't have a single person in the entire nuclear industry you can turn to. That's not going to cut your throat. And laugh about it. They're going to laugh about it. What's his face from the United Kingdom? There was Helen Callicott. There was Christopher Busby. He used to laugh about it when people would ask him, was he anti-nuclear? Nah, he said, that's just the internet. He made just ridiculed everybody that was worried about Fukushima. Some crazy stuff, eh? He said it was too far for radiation to travel to the United States. I can assure you that's not true. So there's all these stories today telling you the same lie. A tricky operation completed. Around 880 metric tons of hazardous material are inside the power plants. And so they all tell you the same lie, the same propaganda. That's a fraction of a single reactor. It's about one third or one quarter what was in a single reactor building that, by the way, doesn't exist anymore. And they're claiming it's the total of the entire site. Now, I'm not going to put you to the misery of every one of these stories. I got other, and then he says the first one was equivalent to the size of a raisin, but they never said that back in November. They said it was the size of a grain of rice. United States nuclear expert Lake Barrett, a special advisor to the serial killers in the nuclear industry in Japan and the Fukushima cleanup, said they got to develop robots we've never done before. Does that make sense to anybody? That sounds about right. Got 80 years, you still haven't got a robot that can go in there. Hey, lots of fake humanoid robots will pretend they're there, but 3 of Fukushima's 6 reactors went into meltdown. It gets no more prominence than that. That's it. Something that's exterminating all the species on the planet gets no prominence whatsoever. So that's a scary statement imaginable because it means the industry controls your existence and your realities. Went into meltdown. Went in a meltdown. Have a nice day. A conspiracy theorist. Endorsed by the degenerate Atomic Energy Agency. And they like to censor my videos. Every video. I'll give you an example, actually. Let me give you an example. Here's a little clip that the International Atomic Energy Agency. You got to go to videos, and it's a 3-minute video. This is what they edited out of my anniversary video, and then what I had done was I'll show you now. At 3 Mile Island, just before 3 Mile Island, we had evidence the International Atomic Energy Agency deleted sections of live anti-nuke YouTube videos. That video there, anyway. But the section that they edited out, just that little section, was almost 3 minutes long. And I'm going to play that for you. This is what they edited out of a single video. But they edited something out of each of my videos. So that's why you should watch it in the first 12 minutes. Just bear with me. I'm going to adjust the volume on your end for you. And I'm going to play a clip that was chopped out of my anniversary, 14-year anniversary video from 2025. There was 2 sections. This is one of the sections. I'm going to post this by itself and the other section by itself. It looks like the International Atomic Energy Agency are the ones who were behind censoring and clipping my videos, clipping stuff out of my videos for the last at least 4 years on this particular site. Here we go. Remember, this was chopped out of my anniversary video this year, 2025. This is the back of Reactor 4. Those stacks, they look close, but they're actually not. They're so lethal, you'll die right away. If you go over there and stand up for a minute, your organs will melt. They're at 25 sieverts at the base of them. So whoever was doing this, they would have died that day. That's the most ruthless pictures imaginable. The industry has no soul. Whenever I see these pictures, I picture somebody at the International Atomic Energy Agency with a microphone talking to whoever's taking the picture, telling them to point to where they want that person to go from Vienna, right? In Vienna. The IAEA, as far as I know, didn't go there for at least 12 years, till 2023. And that was just to pick up a check for, what was it? I can't remember. $19 million? Because Japan is the 3rd biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. So whoever stood there, they died that day for sure. Whoever took these pictures most likely died that day or that week. And there you got the 4 little monsters all in a row. A total of 36 reactor cores. And there was 1 in each reactor, except for reactor 4. It was in the pool. And so that meant in the pools of each of them were 8 reactors. So there was 9 reactor cores in unit 4. 9 in reactor 3, 9 in reactor 2, 9 reactors in number 1. They're all gone. And whoever took that picture, they're gone too. Like the reactor cores, they're gone. It's the most frightening pictures I've ever seen. When you spray a region, whenever you spray these regions to bind with the fuel particulates, that's a no man's land forever. It's just absurd that they had somebody do that. That was the International Atomic Energy Agency, no less. And the fuel pool of reactor 1 was dispersed in an explosion. And the same thing clearly for reactor 3 and reactor 4. So why did they chop that out of my video? Right? Is that a good question? Let me get rid of that. 118 views. To get any thumbs up? 27 thumbs up. They chopped it out of my anniversary video 12 hours later. That clip was missing. And I done a whole show and showed you how that played out, right? On top of that. But that was the clip that they had chopped out. What are you going to do? A bunch of monsters. I know. I hear you. They've now compromised every species on the planet. Local pushback halted plans to reuse soil from Fukushima. That was yesterday's story. government's first attempt to reuse. That's simply not true. It's literally the furthest thing from the truth. They've done it many, many times. Let me bring you up a quick example. People are insane, eh? The industry is actually insane. And if you're not insane, you can't get a job, apparently. They're growing food. Like they put that stuff in these bags, they laid it across the road, and then they're growing food for harvest. Try making that up on your own. And I got that out of the mainstream media, and then they call me a conspiracy theorist. Mildly radioactive soil, scrapped due to local opposition. They spent $3.8 million US for a few truckloads of the soil. So they had a few 1-ton bags, 2, 3, 4 1-ton bags. They have 30 million. I don't see why it would cost them $3.8 million for flowers, for landfill for flower beds. So if you go back down to when Ralphie L. Grossi went down and picked up that $19 million check, you have this story here. International Atomic Energy Agency says public trust is the key to projects using radioactive soil. They spent $28 billion picking up 30 million 1-ton bags of radioactive fallout. And then they went into the nuclear wasteland, the no-go zone, dumped it, and they're growing food in it. And think about the statement by the International Degenerate Agency. The International Atomic Energy Non-Agency is not a regulator and is not in the position to judge or approve the Jap soil recycling project. In nuclear recycling, it's not soil, it's radioactive soil. It's no longer, it's not part of the solar system material, it's anthropogenic man-made material. Clark said, noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan's plan is in line with the IAEA, with United Nations safety standards on disposal of there is no standard. Everything's gone straight into the ocean, and they're cutting the bags open and growing food in it as we speak in many places. International Atomic Energy Agency assures safety of water release from Fukushima disaster site 2023. Grossi, the guy who goes around sniffing bicycle seats, emphasized in the International Atomic Energy Agency report that its document is neither a recommendation or an endorsement of the water release. The Japanese government have the final say. So in the first story, they say they're not a regulator and not in a position to judge or approve Japan's decision with radiation. In the next story, same year, they say it's neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. They agree with Japan that it's safe. That is a recommendation. That is an endorsement. When they're quoted as being a so-called nuclear watchdog, how is that not a recommendation? How is that not an endorsement? But the Japs government have the final say. The government, the nuclear industry, has the final say. And now we have no future because of this industry. Fukushima, Japan gets United Nations nuclear watchdog approval for water release. It says that in the story, and the other story too. Not that one, but this one. IAEA assures the safety. They assure you. They guarantee you the safety. But they're neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. How is I assure you it's safe not an endorsement or a recommendation? How does that work? They can't open their fucking mouth without lying. Because they hate your guts. Japan gets UN nuclear watchdog approval. Watchdog. They're the furthest thing from a watchdog can ever be. It's a conflict of interest. You can't promote nuclear and be the watchdog too. Can't be Fuel debris collected again at Fukushima end plant. What the hell is an end plant? I'm not going to say that word, but what? Oh, nuclear plant. So the average person doesn't, they see end plant, and they're notorious for, that particular media is notorious for doing that, by the way. And it's in the section of society. Not science, but society. How many people read the society section of the newspaper, by the way? Besides me. Most people just going straight to the science and tech, or get their fix on whatever subject it is, but not. Society is not going to be high on their list, I wouldn't imagine, for the average person section to read. The sample collected from the number 2 reactor was put into a container for transport. Woo, baby. Exciting times. And they need jet fighters and satellites and drones. They need military and navy. They need snipers. Just watch when the headlights come out in a few days. Under great secrecy, the sample arrived. I mean, these people are retarded. Like, why not use a vacuum cleaner on that contraption so they don't have to keep doing this? It took them 12 days to go down and get something the size of 2 raisins. And if you're so gullible you believe that, even a fraction of that stuff, and you went to university, you should get your money back. Like, there should be a law, right? The sample will be analyzed at a research lab of the Japan's Atomic Energy Agency. A telescopic device was put inside the reactor and a claw gripper. It's like 16 feet, 44 tons. I gotta grab a piece the size of a rice. And a claw gripper on the edge of the device grabbed debris on Thursday. Well, there she is in all of her glory, 4 years and $40 million later. It's like a fishing rod, only stupider. And it's got a set of tongs on the end of it. As blind as it can be. And so why not put duct tape on it? Why not put a vacuum cleaner hose on it? So instead of going back every couple of months to get a sample, the size of a raisin or a grain of rice, you got all your samples you ever wanted. You scam, you dirty scam artists, you scumbags. TEPCO shouldn't exist. They were nationalized right away. Okay, now nobody moves. Everybody hold their breaths. I'm going to get the cover on this baby. Then I'm going to go collect some beer bottles so I got enough money for a case of beer tonight. You really think they're scientists? Look at the duct tape on his head holding his helmet on. You really think they're nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, journalists? Do you? Really? Sucker. Moron. TEPCO removes the second sample of debris. TEPCO. My TEPCO robot. We call him Calm Down Charlie. Hello, calm down. Calm down, Charlie. Sleepy time. Hello, everybody out in Dana's nuclear land. Calm Down Charlie. I got some updates on Calm Down Charlie. I got some news about what he used to do before he got his job at the Tokyo Bureau Chicago Division. He was the towel boy at the bathhouse in Japan for about 11 years. He was the best, apparently. The best money can buy. Leslie can hold his breath a long time under the pool, too, apparently. TEPCO removes the second sample of debris from Fukushima nuclear power plant. Sample collected at different locations from the first debris removal. With their tongue. So idea. Such a stupid story. I'm embarrassed to tell the story. They tell so many lies you You can't keep up with it. Fukushima Prefecture family's spirit lifted by a giant stone robot. Pro-nuclear, literally the stupidest people you're going to meet too. I would say if you had a poll, or you had a contest where they had to tie their own shoes, maybe 3 out of 10 could tie their own shoes. Doesn't matter how many degrees they got. Because the people that with all these degrees, they're the kids that went to university and they didn't have any plans get a degree, and then they were like, "Oh, like I'm kind of accepted here. I like it here. Yeah, but you need a job, so you make all kinds of money. Well, this is fine. I'm going to do another degree because nobody's ever been nice to me before." And after you get 3 or 4 or 5 degrees, then somebody in the nuclear industry will find them and say, "Well, he's stupid. We could use him, and he'll do anything for the nuke to be popular, right?" That's your typical nuclear expert. They were a reject of society. Even today, with a cushy job, all kinds of money, they're still the rejects of society, and rightfully so. Along the way to the famed hot springs of this northeastern neighborhood city, this reporter spotted a giant stone robot statue that seemed out of place in an unassuming residential area. This reporter. A reporter is somebody whose job it is to cut your throat. That's his job. Their job is to make sure you don't have a future. To fuck you out of your future. That's their job. Oh, yeah. Stone robot in Fukushima raised the spirits of people, did it? Because some reporter found it? Because I guess he's on a high. In fact, I know who that reporter is, actually. He looks just like this guy, actually. Let me go find him. Well, I think actually is Calm Down Charlie. Is Yoshida Machada. Hang on. Oh my God, I got it. Praise the Lord. How many people knew I was going to go get him? I'm pro-nuclear. He's quite the weasel. So the academics had just done a presentation as how vicious the radiation fallout was. They were like horrified. And so that was question time from the reporters. And he gets up and take it away, scumbag.
Krishna, freelance writer for Yuka Fuji.
Let me do that again.
Krishna, freelance writer for Yuka Fuji, and I'm a generous member of the Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information. I'm pro-nuclear power generation. Restart of the nuclear plants much more beneficial than worrying too much about the fact-finding or the...
Don't worry too much about fact-finding. You really got to be quite the worm. But like he starts out with, "I'm pro-nuclear." It cracks me up every time he hears it. That's a warning, right? He's warning these guys. Like, don't talk back to me, man. I'm pro-nuclear, okay? We don't know who built it or why. Of course you don't, because you're a journalist. How could you know shit like that? You can't expect you to do real journalism. That's criminal, right? Fuel debris samples fished out second time. Fished out. No prominence whatsoever. Like, they try to make it inconsequential. Like, come on, honey, change the channel. Dana's talking about an extinction event again. He's crazy. The TV never says it. This time, the tiny and chunk don't go together. It's not good grammar. Smarten up. Tevco inserted a 22-meter long fishing rod device up my butt, basically, and your butt and everybody else's, every species. Debris was placed in a special container to complete the recovery. Wait for the next story to get the rest of that. They had armed guards, and they had the Navy, and they had tanks on standby all along the route. There was helicopters. They were followed by 5 ambulances. The total debris in the nuclear plants number 1, number 2, and number 3 reactor. Could it be 880 tons? Where the cores melted down, where the core meltdowns occurred. Not very often you hear them say the word meltdowns with an S, because that's usually censored online. All social media usually censors that one out, right? Is estimated at, you guessed it, 880 tons. They're trying awful hard. That's part of the story. The last one and this one is about promoting 880 tons, right? Which is about 1/3, 1/4 of a single reactor. But they're claiming it's all the fuel combined. Because there's nothing there, right? Everything is gone. So that's the cover story. We knew that was coming. The first attempt to use a fishing rod style device was repeatedly interrupted due to a series of connection errors, problems with the camera. Now, the homeless never ever played with cameras before. It took a while for them to figure out how to do it. Because scientists are not going to go there and say, well, I'm not part of this. I'm going to be part of this. So that's like I showed the stories last night where they had these people sat there. The guy stood up, or TEPCO. The guy in the nuclear industry, the people sat down in front of the monitors, had their faces blacked out. It's just absurd, right? They're blacked out because they were homeless and destitute and victims of society. How are you going to convince somebody? You got to sit there, and your job is to pretend, because only a dead man tells no tales, right? Fukushima robot began second attempt to retrieve, and they show you meat get sliced off. That's you, by the way. Telesco, that's what they named the stupidest contraption I've ever seen. And the problem with it is that if you put it down there with if it didn't all disappear, China syndrome, there's some still around there, but not much, right? And it burned, as you can see in the pictures I showed you, absurdly hot. It take 12 days to travel down there. But the problem is, once you put that contraption, that claw, or that, not even a claw, it's a pincher. It's like better to use 2 chopsticks. Once you put that down there with the hot stuff, you bring it up, you can never go friggin' near that piece again. Right? You can't go up and make adjustments because it's a lethal dose. It'll melt your organs. Russia's capture of Ukrainian nuclear power stations put the whole world at risk. It's absurd. Now, Fukushima put the whole world at risk. Oh boy. So they're looking for a reason just to be scumbags. This is 23 days of radioactive fallout from Fukushima. 23 days. 23 days. This is cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. 10 million times pre-Fukushima numbers per cubic meter of air. And cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet every second. E-doggy. Nuclear power stations across the world are increasingly vulnerable to the attack after Russia's capture of Europe's biggest facility during its invasion of Ukraine. No, Russia was kicking the bioweapons labs North America had set up there for many years, right? NATO was trying to get their hands on it because then they can set up shop there. And Russia kicked them out. A leading think tank. I'm a think tank and I'm a leading one too. I've been at it for seems like forever at this stage. Have used the site to create fear. Well, it's a war zone. You keep knocking the power off the site. Keep doing everything fearful you can do. All war is fearful, isn't it? Israel wants to attack Iran's nuclear plants. Don't worry about Russia. They haven't attacked it by now, they're not going to. But Israel wants to attack the nuclear facilities, nuclear plants in Iran, for goodness sakes. Search for sterile neutrinos continue at a nuclear reactor. You know, the anti-neutrinos here in a study in Canada last year, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago maybe, and because they're on a Canadian shield, it's just granite. And so 150 miles away from a nuclear plant, they were able to capture neutrinos in 1 mile down in the granite in a tunnel, all mined, converted, and they had a big vat of special water, and they were able to count the anti-neutrinos coming through. And they were able to then, they can quantify saying that there's a nuclear power plant 150 miles away in that direction. Because that's where the neutrinos, anti-neutrinos, were coming 150 miles away and a mile underground. That's pretty freaking incredible, isn't it? Gas, oil, and coal plants don't have those attributes. If you took all this energy and put it into geothermal, you wouldn't care less about nuclear. Nuclear is simply not about what they're claiming, see? It's about getting the ultimate weapons. It's about getting the ultimate concoction for whatever it is, whatever equation they're trying to validate, right? It's like nuclear power plants are not about power. That's a byproduct of the chain reaction, is power. It was meant to suck you into this, into that never-ending cycle of misery that those things create. It's about the fuel cycle. And once it goes through the chain reaction to the point where the fuel rods are starting to expand, becoming fragile, they have to take them out. But at that point, now it's a breeder fuel. And so now it's producing a prolific amount, even though it's not in a reactor no more, prolific amount of isotopes that they want and need for weapons they can't use, which is the ultimate betrayal. You kill all the species for a weapon you can't use because you have the Secrecy Act to back you up and you're just idiots and greedy and scum and degenerate inbreeds. Because that's what we're talking about. The nuclear industry, the people that gravitated to it, they were able, they have to do some pretty sick shit their first couple of years. And because you're talking about real dorks, the whole industry is an industry of scumbag dorks on top of that, right? Just dysfunctional. Great educations, they can recite a book, basically. But none of them come up with a new design. They don't have innovation. There is no renaissance. Right? They're still working on the designs from the early 1900s. They haven't come up with anything new because they're entitled, right? They feel that they're entitled. And neutrinos, elusive fundamental particles, can act as a window into the center of a nuclear reactor. Yeah, whoopee friggin' do. It shouldn't exist in the first place, the nuclear reactor. The interior of the Earth, or some of the most dynamite objects in the universe. That's a pretty big, you're a little bit above yourself there, buddy. Their tendency to change flavors may provide clues into the prominence of matter over antimatter. Last thing I want to do is give these chicken X's antimatter. In the universe, or explain the existence of dark matter. Because here's what nuclear has already done to you. And we have the documentation. This is France's model. I'm going to jump ahead. Of radioactive fallout based on 20 days right there, radioactive fallout, for goodness sakes, covering the whole planet. So we launched research expeditions for 6 years. And I hit this thing in every direction you can imagine. You have no idea. 4 to 5 months a year, every opportunity, I was on the ocean without coming back home, traveling amongst 27,000 islands, under siege the entire time, demonized and vilified by 1,000 public relation firms. Dana, you gotta come ashore, you're scaring people. Because I was taking pictures of the species to see if these species, was there any discrepancies. And to your left, you can see what it's supposed to look like in 2000, well, what it would look like in 2011, and to your right, there's nothing left. So I went back for 5 extra years, because the species to your left, there was no oasis in the 27,000 islands. Like, we documented everything before I started these expeditions, right? We had all the radioactive fallout. This was Neptunium-239 after 20 days over there. It decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. Here's plutonium, by the way, 20 days. And there's 27,000 islands up there. So I'd done the outside and the pinch points. So you get 27,000 islands, but then you have the outside islands, and the tides have to fit through big gaps or small gaps, whatever. So there's a lot of oxygen. That's your prime spot. Before I'd done the other stuff, you got more shelter, right? So done it for 6 years. The species didn't recover. Not only that, they disappeared. The species to your left now are exterminated. So I don't care about neutrinos. I don't care about anti-neutrinos, you sick and twisted, creepy little creatures that work in this industry. You're a curse on humanity and the 8 million species. You're the epitome of stupid because you refuse to accept science. Like, they told so many lies. This was that one over there. They said, take hope this is Fukushima disaster map is fake. That was NOAA's tsunami map. That was, if you go up and look up Fukushima, if you look up Fukushima, I'll do it for you right now, actually. Fukushima and Pacific. Usually that map to the left I was showing you will show up. Oh, maybe the world's coming to its senses. Oh, I gotta put radiation in there. Hey, maybe the world is finally coming to its senses and not feeding you the fake map all the time. Well, that's brave. That's why. If we had Google there. Google. And geez, get the telephone book at me. So, Fukushima radiation. Let me see what we get for just curiosity's sake. All right, so totally different, right? So, you see the one to the left? See how often that one shows up in the search? You got that wiener scumbag up right here from, you got it up in the corners 2 times right away. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times over there, 8 times. See scam on it? And so they fed that for at least 3 years hardcore. They're still doing it out there in some stories we cover. 9, that's 10 rather, is it? 11, 12, top left hand corner. They're such scumbags. They were feeding that everywhere. You would see that show up all the YouTube videos. You do it on YouTube, right? You'll get even much worse result. But you won't see this one. This is NOAA's too. So that's NOAA's over there, and this was NOAA's cesium-137. And that was by the 30th of March, 2011. The whole ocean was almost covered. But that one was NOAA's tsunami, and they purposely were writing stories. Oh my God, look at the Fukushima radiation fallout in the Pacific Ocean, and you would see that picture. And then in the comments section, it would be like 2 small paragraphs, and then the comments section right away. And then in the comments section would be, hey, stupid, that's the tsunami map, right? Because everybody would go like, holy crap, this is crazy, and it takes the wind out of their sails. What they should have said was, that's and they did, that's NOAA's tsunami. They didn't say, here's NOAA's radioactive fallout actual map. And we've seen that so much. So we went back year after year for research expeditions. The species to your left are exterminated. They never came back. And you can plow in a coastline, and then the species down deeper both sides will just fill up the gap. The ocean itself, of course, would have 1 billion creatures per glass of water, so that just recede the coastlines too. So we sterilized the actual ocean. And I was always reporting on how clear the water was. And many times a year it should be filthy looking with phytoplankton, or during the big blooms of all the shellfish and all the invertebrates without the backbones, everything else, all the species, the halibuts, the herring, the anchovies, the squid, the sardines, all their little microscopic animals. It should be a sea life, see? It's typically, there's 100 million creatures or 1 billion creatures in a glass of water. 75 to 100 million of them. 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain, and the rest are the larvae and small plants and microscopic animals, zooplankton and everything else, right? The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries. And the reason we're talking about that is because I lost the spot I was to. Oh, right there. Neutrinos. In a new study published in Physics Review Letters, a team of researchers from the United States universities and national laboratories, the least trustworthy organizations we're talking about on the planet, set stringent limits on the existence and mass of sterile neutrinos. They have yet to find one. So they had this was postulated through the mathematics, right? And so it should exist, and so they'll spend $1 trillion if that's what it takes to figure this out. They won't spend a nickel on geothermal, but they'll spend $1 trillion trying to see if that equation is true. Because if it is, now you have to figure out the next equation. And that's what they've been up to for their whole existence, basically. The collaboration analyzed data from the Prospect 1 detector station near the high-fluxed isotope reactor at Oak Ridge Degenerate Laboratory. They're on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. That's completely radioactive, and that's feeding just thousands and thousands of farms downstream. Another recent study was even able to use the anti-neutrino signature to point back to the reactor core. Yeah, and I actually talked about this study just now, right? It was a Canadian study they're referring to. Characterizing anti-neutrino emissions from reactors and searching for dark matter. This is the very last thing, like a gram of dark matter can split the moon in two. You ever heard that one? And these are the same chicken necks who now have wrecked all the species on the planet, have an extinction event playing out, an actual extinction level event. We know this because we've done the research expeditions. We're doing the best we can down here, but we don't have the support, right? It's an enormous amount of time and money and resources to pull it off. And they've ostracized me from society, basically. Sam Altman stepped down as the chair of the nuclear startup Oklo. He's a batshit crazy guy, eh? His sister has a rather unusual lawsuit against him. He stepped down because his sister has a pretty wild lawsuit against Sam, the perv. And his own sister, man, really. Good God, boy. And you know, he wasn't supposed to do what he done, right? Elon Musk partnered up with him for the artificial intelligence was supposed to be free, right? And Sam's seen an opportunity to make a whole bunch of money. So now he's actually tied up in lawsuits about that. U.S. reactor company exploring, and with his sister, U.S. reactor company exploring strategic partnership to deploy clean energy. Nuclear is 37 times more dirty than renewables for a data center boom. If they want to have a data center boom, they should build their own friggin' energy sources, and it shouldn't be nuclear. They're using nuclear they're using AI as a catalyst that you got to have nuclear. That nothing else could work, only nuclear. It's absurd. None of them even have an application into the regulatory agencies. Replaced by Jacob DeWitt, the group's chief executive officer and co-founder. So, but his best bud, right? No, they just want to get him out of the picture because the police are very unhappy with him. In December, Oklo signed an agreement to provide 12 gigawatts. Remember that story? We made fun of that for like 2 weeks straight. The whole story is just ridiculous to suggest it's going to come to fruition. Official void vote, and I apologize if I butcher names. I'm particularly good at it though, so like if I had a job at it, I'd be the best. The Nuclear Warrior is in the works. I think they're trying to raise $23,000 for a video game. If I had $23,000, I'd put 2 new outboard motors on the back of our research boat. We took that thing to Alaska 6 times. I'm surprised it made it down here at all. You know, that's where we're stuck right now. Is we need at least. Well, like if I had my way, I'd put 2 70s on the back of that little Zodiac because you need a kicker, a very good motor because you're talking about the open Atlantic Ocean, right? It's a very, very scary place to hang out in. Everything's good when everything's working, but when something breaks down, man, you are in a world of shit. Dive into a dystopia, a science fiction adventure inspired by legendary albums. A Nuclear Warrior, right? The Nuclear Warrior. Is that the name of the band? I'm guessing they're not playing country and western. Some death metal going on right there a bit. I shouldn't say anything because I got my shirt up. Department of Energy makes $46.7 million loan to, you guessed it, Chris Singh, Holtec. So this is the first time that they ever closed a reactor where they're going to bring it back online. And Chris Singh, if you don't know anything about him, he's He's the janitor and the CEO of Holtec. He's a despicable creature on top of that. As they seem to be, eh? Just, got all these shakers, so-called shakers and movers, but social skills, they have nothing. They really are, they're missing a lot of fundamental DNA. A third loan disbursement to Holtec, because shithead Biden promised them $1.52 billion a loan. That how are they going to do it without and pay it back? How are they going to bring that up? How are they going to make that work? Desperation, eh? Because they got the same gigawatts now as they had in 1996. There is no nuclear renaissance. But you still got to keep the pressure. First and foremost, my thoughts on these shows for a long time has always been, I'm targeting the policymakers and the investors for this industry because they're going to seek me out. And everybody in the nuclear industry is a weirdo, so I fit right in, right? In fact, I come across as pretty reasonable compared to the average person they're dealing with. And so now all of a sudden, it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, it's not like walking in sunshine, it's not like climbing a mountain, it's not like sleeping next to somebody. It's not harmless and innocuous and benign. It's lethal on an atomic scale, right? Just a single atom, your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. Going to restart operations at Palisade in October. The Nuclear Non-Regulatory Commission is expected to issue a rubber stamp by July the 31st. The whole industry is dare to win. Right? They have everything at their fingertips. And it's very difficult to fight back against an industry when you have next to nothing. When you're the whole operation is just keep going forward for the most part on willpower, right? We can't have a silent resistance on this planet against an industry like this. And so, whether I like it or not, this is the job, right? This is what you got. You got to have someone out there punching back. And you can't go being nice about it. You can't go sugarcoating any of this shit. You can't sugarcoat. And then the average person is not going to comprehend it unless they're lucky enough to find me and are really, really drunk and get them to hang around and watch a bit and start slowly sinking into their heads. And then people like Greenpeace job is to drag you away from people like myself, right? And the idea of that is they have endless money, so they can get out there very active. They're all the latest gadgets and gadgets. Remember when those projectors which showed up? They were $120,000 each, and you could sit in and put it on the roof of your car and beam it off a skyscraper, right? Your message. Greenpeace went out and bought 5 of them, and he got arrested all over the place. And all the media come out and, jeez, Greenpeace, you bunch of bastards. And they put a link there under each story to Greenpeace to donate to them. It's the same thing with every story on Greenpeace from the mainstream media. They put a link there, and not like a little link, but a big, stupid link to donate to Greenpeace. Because they're the controlled opposition. Arnie Gunnarson's controlled opposition. Helen Callicott, unequivocally controlled opposition. And when you look at the documentation that we provide of their lies, you're like, oh shit. That was just dirty. That was dirty. What Arnie Gunnarsson done, for instance, it was just dirty, man. To say that the fuel was in reactor 4 fuel pool. He worked for a manufacturer that made the racks for the fuel assemblies for 70 identical reactors in the United States. If he didn't know the fuel pool was gone, who would, right? Dirty what he done, man. And then he was being promoted as anti-nuclear. He was being promoted as your best friend in the anti-nuclear industry. And there were certain people out there were conflating my videos at his videos to try to give him street creds. I wasn't very fucking nice about that with these people either. Like, don't go doing it. I told him about 5 times, stop doing it. And finally I got him on the phone and recorded the phone calls. And then I posted the videos that they promptly knocked down and got strikes on my account for it. Dirty man. It's an industry of calculated cowards. It's exceptional, isn't it? Because being a coward of that capacity, you look at James Colbert, even 15 years ago, he was almost bald because he was stressed out about all the terrible stuff he was doing. It was still getting to him subconsciously. The reason I'm bald is because I pulled out my fucking hair out of my head trying to keep this operation moving forward. I'm not joking. So they're dismantling an Italian reactor that they closed down after Chernobyl. Italiano. State-owned nuclear waste management and decommissioning company. State-owned. The worst thing you could ever hear is, hi, we're from the government, we're here to help you. That's the worst words you're ever going to hear, no matter which industry we're talking about. And if it's for nuclear, well, that's catastrophic to humanity then. Approximately 50 tons of metal material will need to be dismantled and removed. And they estimate once the material is treated, you can't treat radiation, say. So they're going to claim that they can treat cement and steel and everything else and have it to an acceptable level. It's not acceptable at this stage. But now they can turn it into toys for your children, right? Because it's at an acceptable level that keeps getting raised over and over and over. With no referendums. One of the reactors was a lousy 100... And most of the fuel, they dumped it off Somalia. And so that poisoned the whole coastline. Right? They took a bunch of old freighters and trawlers, big 150-foot boats, stuffed them with nuclear waste, not all of it, but a lot of it for a number of years, and just sank them off the Somali coastline, ran them over and sank them there. So clearly it was on purpose. And that's why you see the Somali, instead of fishing anymore, taking the fishing boats and going out and hijacking ships because they have no fishery to feed their children with. And the mob, it was just common stories, by the way. The mob was notorious for taking nuclear waste during the whole legacy of this industry there and dumping waste in the local landfills. Italy shut down, the whole story is maddening. Italy shut down the last of the reactors, the Enrico Fermi, scumbag, degenerate Enrico Fermi. In July, he's the guy who came up with the first chain reaction, right? Remember I had got this call years ago and this guy asked, he was pretty sarcastic. Calls me up, you can tell he's part of the industry, right? He said, by the way, Dana, who was the guy again that done the first chain reaction? I said, oh, piece of shit, Enrico Fermi. And you can hear people in the background blow up laughing. They get zero respect. This industry deserves zero, not even contempt. They're just hateful scum. They're going to censor this video. In 12 hours, this video will be different. And my comment section will show up in 12 hours. The video won't move once you get around 100, like it did today and yesterday and every other day. It'll get to around 100 and it'll stop for the rest of the day. And about 2 or 3 hours before the show starts, it'll move 10 or 20 or 30 or something. That's the normal routine. Once the video's over, I'll barely get any views. I'll get maybe 40 views over the next 12 hours. It's censorship, right? They got nobody else to pick on. They can only molest their puppies so much before they're going to come back and work on my fucking head. In July 1990, following a referendum in the wake of the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, So they had a referendum, but they never had a referendum this time, did they? They had a referendum after Fukushima. Should they go back to nuclear? No, man, shut up. So this time they had no referendum at all. We're going small modular reactors. Yeah, they're 50 feet taller than Fukushima, but we're going to call them small. The Italian government, Prime Minister Meloni, is seeking to restore nuclear power in the country. He's not seeking to do it. He's going to go ahead and do it. He said, "There's not referendum. Don't be foolish. What's that?" No referendum this time. In the country to reduce carbon dioxide, it's the dirtiest technology. I showed you at the beginning. It's 37 times more pollution nuclear creates than renewable does. It's 37 times more dirty, carbon intensive. By the way, carbon's good. You can't have trees or plants or anything else with carbon. Can't have babies or puppies. I got to keep the puppies away from these friggers. But Finland could be the first country in the world to bury nuclear waste permanently. Finland. They're going to put all their eggs in one basket, and when it melts down, because it will melt down, you can't leave the stuff alone. It'll melt down, and then that'll ignite all the other. And they built it on an island surrounded by the ocean. Out on an island all by itself, and when it melts down, it'll consume the whole island, and eventually we just big bubbles there forever. It doesn't need oxygen to continue, right? It's the stupid thing you do, and look where they're doing it. Why would you do it in such a pristine-looking, beautiful place? Because that's what nuclear does. It destroys everything good. That's all nuclear knows how to do. It's incapable of doing anything but that. It's good at it. It thrives at being a degenerate piece of shit, idiot and moron machine. It thrives at it. It's the best we got. The best chicken neck on the planet work at nuclear. Because nobody else would take them. Nobody else would take them. Where are we to here? Where am I to is more like it. Is it acceptable for the pro-nuclear journalists and academics in the nuclear industry to viciously and relentlessly lie? Look at the censorship in the video tonight. I love it. Doesn't bother me at all. I gotta point it out that it's happening though. But I mean, do you really think it's gonna make a difference in me doing my show and how I'm gonna do my show? I'm censoring me. I think it makes it worse for them because I got less people to answer to. So I'm more likely to say something more appropriate than I'm not. Oh, to be an amazing crazy nuclear scumbag. Yeah, James got 300 songs out there. Imagine, just wrap your friggin' mind around that statement. 300 songs. Anti-nuclear songs. It's incredible. It's incredible, eh? I'm going to do a special show on his songs in the near future. I'm going to pick a day and play all kinds of my favorite anti-nuclear music. 300 songs. Calm Down, Charlie, Tokyo Rose. That is so good. It's a departure from his normal stuff. And it's awesome, man. Typical return zone, starvation at sea, Fukushima crabs. He's got a purpose, see? And he's getting censored pretty heavily. We're going to play Nuclear Italiano. Because we were just talking about Italy. And this was the song that James wrote about it when Italy announced that they were going to go. Now he does the video, and he everything's AI, but you still got to write everything. You still got to put everything together. You still got to make it all work. You got to make it. You got to make it. Try writing 5 songs is how I like to say it, and see how easy it is. It's not easy at all. So it's some serious determination going on right there. And look how fast it took James to figure out my card trick I was showing everybody. He had it in like 30 seconds. He had a comment there. It says, next set is different. Boom. That was pretty cool when he done that. Cause I kept trying to get people to watch it, right? James had already figured it out in the first few seconds. All right, so I'm going to put the headphones on because I really like this song. I'm going to come and close the poll after. Give us a thumbs up if you make it this far and you're crazy like us. And you like good music, hang around for a minute. Here we go. I'm going to adjust the volume on your side. I'm just going to make sure it's high quality. We'll see everybody maybe tomorrow night. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it tonight. But feeling a bit better. Medication's helping. Last week was a rough week for me, man. Holy smokes. It's good to have, like today I actually feel reasonable. We got a few things done. A good day. Good night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care.
When the votes all said no, but the contracts still go, nuclear Italiano. Once the ballots were cast, now they're tearing the past. Nuclear Italiano. In 1987, they swore it was done. 2011, they told everyone. Now they scribble new plans, shake new powerful hands. Nuclear Italiano. Ministers sing, they say change is near. But the barrels stay full for 1,000 more years. The sun and the wind could be turning the gears, but they toast to reactors with cheer. The price of the gas, they cry in the square, so they built something slow like they just do not care. The wind and the sun could be turning the gears, but instead they bring back nuclear engineers. A plant in the south, another up north. But who will remember when funding runs short? By the time they are built, new papers are signed, and the cycle starts over in time. And although Freighton they shuffle the names, say modular tech will be changing the game, but the people recall when they promised it all, and the answers still sound just the same. Mamma mia, they cheat. 2 votes repeat. They say power is clean, but the cost stays unseen. Nuclear Italiano. Mamma mia, they play. The deal's delay. They say fusion's the goal, but the funding's a whole. Nuclear Italiano. First they say no, then they say yes. The contracts get signed, but who cleans up the mess? One day they ban it, the next day they cheer. The cycle repeats every year. The people all gather, they march in the streets. But in Rome, they just sip their espresso and meet. They say clean, safe, secure as they sign on the line, and the contracts roll in right on time. Mamma mia, they cheat. Deals on repeat. They say future is bright, but the past proves them right. Nuclear Italiano. Mamma mia, they play. The people betray. By the time it's online, all the lobbyists died. Nucleano. Mamma mia, they said no long ago. Now reactors will grow. Nuclear Italiano. By the time they are done, new promises come. Nuclear Italiano.